Okay, we're live.
Hi, everybody. This is Alex. I'm getting ready for the meeting here, putting on my Purell to make sure whenever you go to a meeting out in public like this, you always want to make sure that you're virus free. Welcome back to the Astro Imaging channel. Tonight, we've got a special presentation. It's special to me for a number of reasons. One is I met Debra like a long time ago, back when we were doing PATS in Pasadena, and she did some really interesting work on showing us what color should be like in an astro image. And it was, it was her opinion, and but she's got a pretty good opinion about it. She pretty much knows her stuff. And what was nice about it is that she's actually like trained to know this stuff. And she's going to tell us maybe a little bit about that, but mostly she's going to tell us about, you know, there was a lot of things happening in Deborah's life. I'll let her tell you whatever it is. But and so she kind of got out of astro imaging and for a while, and then she came back and it was all changed. There are new programs, new possibilities, new cameras, new equipment, new procedures. People were finding out things that they didn't know before. And she's going to tell us about some of those changes that she's seen through the years. She'll tell you who she is and all that other stuff. Next week, I think you remember, if you've been around for a while and you've been making every meeting like you should, when Agapios sat down and was telling us about planetary imaging, and he was telling us about how he collimated his scope using MetaGuide and everything. A lot of people know what MetaGuide is because a lot of people do use it, and it's got some special features that you just can't find in any other guiding software. And so we made it a point to get Frank, Frank Freestar 8N, on cloudy nights and stuff like that. He's the guy that wrote MetaGuide, and he says, "Yeah, I'll be there." So Frank's going to be here next week, next Sunday night, taking over for on March 29th, and then the week after that, we have our big NEAF show where, we got our holiday because NEAF's not going to be here. So we're going to have a show that night. Tolga does great work. As you know, he's not only our director and not only our technical expertise as to how to pull these things off, but Tolga got JP Metzavano to come on in. I've seen him at AIC and in a couple of other places, and he's going to tell us a lot also about color and tone mapping and some other things that he's got. So he's going to tell us about that. I think we've got some other people coming after that. I forget who, but those are the next 3 weeks, the next couple of weeks coming up. So please come on back. Don't forget, when you're here, we can use donations. We do need to pay for the web service. A lot of people have been asking us lately, how do we manage to pull this off? Well, we have to have some YouTube services, and we have to have some software services. We have to have a website and some other things, and we got to pay for that. There's a way to do that over on YouTube. There's a couple of links that you can click on, and it'll help you contribute a little bit. We're not going to have National Public Radio telethon here, but we do appreciate that. And we also appreciate very much if you go ahead and subscribe to the YouTube channel after you're watching tonight, or just if you're just watching over in the comment section, click on that thing that says subscribe. And the more subscribers we can get, the more outreach we can get, the more support we get from YouTube itself to help us continue. Okay. Did I mention that we also need presenters? One of the things we do when we go to NEAF and AIC and all the other workshops that we go to whenever we can is we recruit presenters for the program. And that is probably the single hardest job of putting on the Astro Imaging channel, the whole production. We need your help. We need people to volunteer to come on in and do the programs. Don't tell me you don't know how to do it. It's not that hard to do. If you know how to make up a PowerPoint, or if you know how to run a program particularly well, all you have to do is sit there and talk to us while you're doing it. And the technical parts of it, it's easy. You just get in a Google Hangout, and Tolga magically takes care of the rest. So please get in touch with us. Contact us from the astroimagingchannel.com contact information, and we'd love to have you here as a presenter. But we've got a presenter sitting here, and we're going to do the presentation a little different tonight. Um, um, we have a couple of people here from, like, we got one guy in Australia right now, Terry. Terry comes every week and he helps us a lot with some of the technical stuff and some other things. He's always contributing. Well, he's a refugee from Canada. Now we've got another person from Canada today, and that's Deborah. She's up in British Columbia, and they don't have particularly good web service up there. And so they were going a little slow, and Deborah was a little worried about how she was going to pull this off. So the way we did it was we took her presentation and we sent it to California, where Molly was sitting there and she loaded all 15 megabytes of it, of the presentation, on her computer. And Molly's going to be actually showing us the program, and Deborah's in the background helping to explain things. Deborah has a recorded voice and she can interrupt us now and then. Your job as attendees is to ask us questions, post them over there. We'll get them to Deborah and she can take it from there. Um, I should mention, incidentally, that although these people are far away, British Columbia and Australia, Terry and Deborah went to the same high school at the same time. They didn't know that till last week when we were practicing up for the show. So it's all home week for
True.
them. Deborah, take it. Go ahead.
Okay, thanks, Alex. So yeah, we have pretty bad bandwidth here, and you're not even coming in very well for me right now. I hope I am to you, but I'm gonna just let Molly run it. There's three parts to it. There's just like a PowerPoint presentation, and in the middle there is going to be a PixInsight tutorial, and then finish with a little more of the PowerPoint that Molly's going to run. So I'm just going to turn off my microphone and I'm going to let Molly take it. Hi, everybody. I actually got started doing image processing sometime around 2007, 2008, or thereabouts. But I should also mention that I have always been interested and involved with astronomy in general. I did a lot of public outreach with my local club, and photography has always been part of my life as long as I can remember. But image processing began not as a hobby, but as work to produce reasonably good images to help promote this instrument that my husband, Peter Ceravolo, had designed and developed. It's a 300 millimeter or 12-inch corrected Cassegrain, and it's my favorite instrument. I really, really enjoy using it. Peter is an optical designer and a telescope maker and had a company called Ceravolo Optical Systems. This is a recent photo of me with the astrograph in our home observatory. And the instrument has a unique and interesting history. And let me get my laser pointer here. There we go. So Peter began designing a large format astrograph sometime around 2005. Because at the time there were CCD camera companies coming out with really large format cameras, like chips that were 4K by 4K arrays, which are great, but the problem was that most existing telescopes could not fill the large CCD chips without significant vignetting. So Peter's design was to address that problem. The first prototype on the left was a 280 millimeter astrograph and was the proof of concept. Here it was coupled with the ST large format camera here. And this design was actually a corrected Cassegrain, or also known as CDK. Its compact design with field correctors could fill the large format CCD camera without vignetting and had sharp stars all the way to the corners. So it was quite successful. It worked well and was quite a wide field, more than a degree. But the interesting thing is, during a dinner with some friends way back then, it was mentioned that wide field is nice, but astro imagers want high resolution too. So Peter set about designing something that could do both. And so the second prototype was conceived. The one on the right, it was a 300 millimeter or 12-inch. That's the astrograph you saw earlier, and was an improvement because it was larger and faster, had f2 primary and wide field with high resolution. You can actually swap out the field correctors and go from an f4.9 to a focal ratio to an f9 for high resolution. It was like having two telescopes in one. And these photos were taken from our home in Ottawa, but we knew we had to go someplace better, for better weather, to really test it out, to get some good images for marketing. And so we went to Arizona quite a few times, southeast corner near the Chiricahua Mountains. Peter, he acquired a lot of the images with the Apogee U16M 16803 camera here, with the filter wheel, Astrodon filters in there. And many of you could probably relate to this mess of cables that goes with all the gear. My goodness, it's just a mess. But that's what happens when you're traveling with equipment or you don't have a permanent observatory. But even a permanent observatory can get pretty messy. Now, I'll mention our solution to that later on. And here's just a couple of photos of the Astrograph's back end here, where you can actually swap out the corrector cells. The corrector lenses here, we got the f9 on the left, the f4.9, and you put it in there, do a little collimation, and off it goes. You got another instrument. So it was pretty innovative design at the time. So in Arizona, we were pretty productive. We got a lot of images. Peter did all the acquisition out in the cold, and I did all the processing in a nice warm house. And but at the time, I didn't have very many resources to help me learn how to do that. I read some books and I watched a few talks, and basically I just jumped into the deep end. And I learned how to calibrate and stack in Maxim DL, and I registered and cropped in Registar, and I did all the processing in Photoshop. I didn't feel like I knew what I was doing for a while. It took a long time, and there was a lot of trial and error, but mostly error. It was hard, but I persevered, and the results were not that bad. And by the early 2008, I had produced enough images that were good enough for advertising. So what we did was we rounded up all the usual suspects, like the Horsehead Nebula, the Pleiades, the Orion Nebula. We had the Rosette, Andromeda, of course, and this is the Great Wall of the North American Nebula. And a lot of these have hydrogen alpha mixed in there too. And so we were able to do some advertising. My background is actually graphic designing, advertising, and photography. So I got into producing all of the posters and ads and brochures and the website. So by 2008, we were ready to take this product to market, and it was ready for sale. Here it is at the Astro Imaging Conference in San Jose, and it was pretty well received, but there was one big problem. Having a product ready for sale at the end of 2008 was not exactly good timing. So, as you know, just in time for the Great Recession, work slowed for everyone, and amateur astronomers weren't buying big toys. And the instrument was quite expensive to produce, being made here in Canada and built like a battleship. And so that had a very expensive price, and sales were slow. So what do you do? Well, we went to Chile. San Pedro de Atacama was a beautiful place to go. Really pristine, clear skies for 3 whole weeks. It was summer at home and it was winter there. And we had a great time, really enjoyed being in Chile. I highly recommend going. So we were also very productive then, got a lot of new images from the Southern Hemisphere. Here we have the Lagoon Nebula, the Helix. Now that you can see from the Northern Hemisphere, but it's really low in the sky, so you can never really get a good image of that. Same with the Lagoon. Omega Centauri, the Large Magellanic Cloud with the Tarantula Nebula. This is a complex called the the Corona Australis complex, and the Trifid were pretty nice images to work with. I really enjoyed working with. So we continued doing more ads with new images. We kept going with the advertising, hoped that things would pick up soon. So in the meantime, I began to develop my own philosophy about astro images, astro imaging, and how they were being represented in the global community, particularly on the subject of color. At the same time, I was being asked to give talks at various conferences on image processing, and I got busy with that for a couple of years. But I was kind of going against the stream. I was outspoken against stronger contrast, saturation levels, sharpening, and over-the-top processing, and false color. I wanted to keep it more real. I like to be able to tell people that this image in space is its true color, or at least close to that. There was a big competitive push on who could produce the most vivid, fantastic, colorful, out of this world images of astronomical objects. The limits seemed to be ever changing, and it was the Wild West, it seemed. Of course, the Hubble images, which were amazing, had a great influence on imagers. But to non astronomers, who's to know what real colors are? To some, that didn't matter, but to me, and I think a lot of people, it did. I personally like to know what the real color of that, whatever object I'm looking at or showing others. Also, narrowband filters were becoming popular, especially for people who lived in light polluted places and could still get decent images. So colorizing their image in the Hubble palette was very popular. But to me, it seemed like there was way too much of it everywhere. And the results were fantastic, very powerful. In fact, Peter thought I should be doing it, but so I started some of my talks. My message was to tone things down a little, get back to a more natural look with real colors. That was my message, and I was not going to win any popularity contests. I was a small voice in a loud world. I wasn't always that well received. And in 2009, we went to the AIC as a vendor, and I took in a talk about colorizing images with the Hubble palette. And I was surprised to see how it was done. Immediately, I thought, if they can do that, why not do the same thing but with correct colors? So I tried to come up with a technique to colorize images with the actual wavelength that a filter is letting through. I thought about this for many months and I couldn't come up with an answer. How in the world could I tell Photoshop to use a specific wavelength? And the answer came to me from a professor at the San Diego University, and I'll get into that in a minute. But first, here's what some were doing, and I did, for a more natural color. I think Rob Gendler came up with this way back when. There is another way to enhance our RGB images with narrowband data in Photoshop and still keep it real. One thing I should mention about true color, all color is really an approximation. It's subjective to a certain extent due to human eye and cameras and filters, and the atmosphere, monitors, browsers, and so on. But still, I wanted to quantify it somehow. Anyway, here I've blended the narrowband images with color broadband images, and the H alpha goes in with the red because H alpha belongs naturally in the red. And S2 also, S2 is a deeper red. And the oxygen's blended in with both the green and the blue channels because the oxygen's wavelength is actually right between the two. But they're all blended in gently, only about 25% each, using the opacity tool in Photoshop. So the objects in space are emitting at specific wavelengths. And the red, green, and blue broader wavelengths, but there's a central transmittance depending on the quantum efficiency of the camera or the filters. And the narrowband, of course, are very specific wavelengths. But the question was, can the colors of an image be spectrally mapped? It seemed like you can't get there from here, at least for a long time. So the spectrum is something real and physical. The color wheel is a construct to assign colors in software like Photoshop. So red is usually 360 degrees, green is 120 degrees, and blue is 250 degrees. These are default settings in Photoshop for color, which to me seemed a little, I don't know, arbitrary to some extent. So the solution. There was a professor, Andrew T. Young, from the San Diego University that, in a way, was trying to do the same thing many, many years earlier with the Viking missions with NASA. He wanted the images of the planets in the solar system to be represented in a real way. In a way, he lost and was frustrated at the people involved back then, and the planets were often represented in fantastic colors. But one time he wrote a paper about quantifying the true color of the green flash, and he came up with a calibrated spectrum for the monitor. And I came across this paper and I thought, hey, is this the answer? Can I use this in Photoshop? So I contacted Dr. Young And he was very encouraging, and he wished me luck with my mission. So what I did was I brought it into Photoshop, and I used the eyedropper tool in Photoshop here, and I would click on the wavelength of the particular filter I wanted to get the values of. And when you click on it, you get up, the color picker shows up here. You click on the color picker, and up comes this box where it tells you what the hue, saturation, and brightness levels, the values are for that particular wavelength. So I thought, okay, that's a start. Let's see what we can do with that. So I do that with each one of the filters, all six of them, the red, green, and the blue, and the three narrow bands. And I would layer them in Photoshop, and I'd have the hue saturation tool attached to each one of them, and they're all in the screen blending mode. And when you click on the hue saturation tool here, up comes this box that, lo and behold, gives you these spaces where you can enter the values that you got from the color picker. So I thought, well, let's try and see what happens. And so, of course, you get all different colors, all the six images and their corresponding colors, they're all different. And so you put them all together. And the results were interesting. Sometimes it worked really well depending on what nebula you're working on, and sometimes it didn't. It didn't work so well on galaxies and that sort of thing. But I thought it was interesting that the lagoon on the left was the old way I did with the enhancement in Photoshop, originally that Rob Gendler I learned from. And then the spectral color mapping, where the center of the Lagoon Nebula seemed to be showing a lot more blue, which is the oxygen coming through, and a lot more detail everywhere because each of the layers were on their own 100%, not blended in at small amounts. So it was kind of interesting. And then a little bit after that, I came up with that idea. In 2011, I gave a talk to the Society for Astronomical Sciences in California, and the editor of Sky and Telescope was there, and he asked me to write an article for the magazine. So I did, and it was published in December 2011. And that was then, and at this point, we stopped the astro imaging altogether. The astrograph was not selling very well, and we had to stop making the product and get back to making money. Our industrial optics business really picked up around then and pretty much consumed us for the next 10 years. And I had concentrated all my time on running the business. I had only gotten back to image processing recently, partly because I missed it, and also because Peter's been working on a new and exciting telescope design that I needed to get caught up with what's happening now. So fast forward 10 years, last September, I took a 2-day workshop for PixInsight with Ron Breacher and Warren Keller. There's Ron there, there's Warren. And that got me going on PixInsight. And it was pretty challenging, difficult software to get going on. But they really helped a lot. And I really love this software. I think it's brilliant, actually. And I like that I can calibrate and stack and align and crop and process all in one software. I do use Photoshop a little bit at the end of the processing for some things, though. And this workshop was at the Dominion Astrophysical Observatory in Victoria, BC. And this plastic 100-year-old telescope is in this dome here. Has quite a history, too. And I really love the city of Victoria. It's a 5-hour drive for me, plus a ferry. But my daughter and her husband live there, so it was a pretty good trip for me. And since then, I've been taking a lot of time learning PixInsight. I used many resources like Adam Block's online tutorials. It really helped me a lot. And there's a website called Light Vortex Astronomy, and there are lots of forums with lots of ideas and useful information out there. And I'm now busy reprocessing all the old data from 10 years ago. So along the lines of wanting to keep colors real, I learned a couple of techniques to do that in PixInsight. So I made a 10-minute demo with blending narrowband and color data using pixel math. and the blend mode. So we'll go ahead and we'll run that next. Okay, there.
Do we want to pause for any questions from you guys? I haven't seen anything on YouTube.
Yeah,
I'll probably run it.
what I saw over there on the YouTube questions were a lot of people envying you the fact that you had enough time to actually use, what is it, 6 different filters to grab a picture. So that was nice, but I think it is time to go ahead and run the demonstration on PixInsight, Molly.
Actually, Molly, I have one question for Debra.
Yeah.
The RGB filters are relatively broad. What would you say, 50, 100 nanometers, whereas the narrowband filters are 7, 5, or 3 nanometers. When you're assigning a particular color, how do you get around, an assignment of say, the red filter to be one particular wavelength?
Basically, you just take the central transmittance of that filter, because if you look at the specs on every filter, you will see its graph, like a Gaussian graph, and it took central peak of the broadbands and used that for mapping. And I always used 5 nanometer narrow bands, but usually hydrogen alpha, for example, what the wavelength is, but it's a very specific wavelength. Does that answer your question?
Sure. Why don't we go ahead?
There are actually several ways that you can enhance an RGB image with narrowband data. I'm going to show you 2, one using Pixel Math and the other using the script called Blend. So here I'm starting with an RGB image of the Tarantula Nebula and an H-alpha image of the Tarantula Nebula. Like this object is just full of H-alpha. There's a really good one to use for demonstration for enhancing H-alpha. And it was captured in Chile, and so it's only seen in the southern hemisphere in the Large Magellanic Cloud. It's a pretty cool object. So I've done all the work before. I've done all the integration and calibration and cropping, all that good stuff, and got to the point where I combined my red, green, and blue channel to an RGB. And I went further and did a photometric calibration of this, and I think that's one of the best processes in PixInsight is the photometric color calibration. It does plate solving, and it goes out there and it gets you an image, or it changes your image to match the true colors. And so it's a pretty good representation of the colors. It's a good start. And so it's important that you do that first, because if you don't, then you're not dealing with proper colors and it's going to be all thrown off. Now, before I do anything like extract the red channel out of there, which I'm going to do, one of the things that you really should do before you extract anything from the RGB channels is you need to put your red, green, and blue channels on an equal playing ground. So you bring up RGB working space, move the sliders all the way to the right, and so they're all on an equal playing field here. I would just grab the instance here and throw it on there, and you're not gonna see anything, and I'm not actually gonna do it because for some reason, this screen recording software doesn't allow me to make any instances work, so I had to cheat. I've already done it. Now, I'm going to extract the red channel here, because I'm gonna put away my RGB for now. I need to get a auto stretch here. So I got the red channel and I've got the H-alpha. Now, if I was just to put the H-alpha into the red channel as it is, it's gonna look ugly, or the stars will look ugly, because you don't want narrowband stars. Narrowband stars are much smaller than RGB stars, and RGB stars have nice color. So what you're gonna end up with is halos and kind of a pupil look to your stars. So what you want to do is really you want to take this image, not do a star mask, but to do pixel math to remove those stars. And let's see, I have a pixel math here. I'm going to bring this up. Now, the expressions, like I didn't come up with these expressions. I actually found them on a really great website called Light Vortex Astronomy. Excuse me. And it gives you, if you look up LRGB combining narrowband, it'll do you step by step, and it'll give you these expressions that you can copy and paste into the pixel math. It's doing all kinds of math magic here, multiplying and dividing and subtracting and blah blah blah, and it's pretty cool. Now down here in the symbols, you want to put in the bandwidth of your filters that were used. For example, the red bandwidth, I started with the value of 80 because it's 80 nanometers, and H alpha is 5 nanometers. Now this is the value you can change in order to get the desired effect. And to get rid of, like I started with 80 and it didn't get rid of enough stars. I went down to 70 and then 60 and then 50, and I ended up with 40. And I was fairly happy with that. So I'm going to close that. Normally I would take this instance, I would put it on the red, and up comes a new image. But you have to tell it down here to create a new image under destination. So I've already done that. And now here is my image that I ended up with. I'll put the H alpha away. Now I have a starless H alpha image, and it looks kind of weird. It's got black speckles where the stars used to be, but not to worry, that won't affect the end result. But this is what you're going to want to work with. Now I'm not going to need this red anymore. What I'm going to do is put that away. I could just close it completely, but I'm just going to put it away because I'm going to use it later for the blending. I'm going to bring up my RGB again, and I want to integrate this into the red channel of the RGB. In order to do that, again, pixel math. Again, on Light Vortex Astronomy's website, you will find these expressions that you can copy and paste in here. But basically, it's just saying, I want this object, this image, to go into a red channel only. And then it's also telling you that don't bother the green channel, don't bother the blue channel. And now here in symbols, there's boost factor. The default is 1.0, which is kind of like saying it's 50-50. Anything less than 1 will, you'll have less hydrogen alpha in the red channel. Anything more than 1, you'll have more hydrogen alpha. And so you play with those, this value to get your desired result. And again, I can't just drop, I would normally just take this and drop it onto my RGB, but I can't do that here. I've already done it. I'm going to close this. And this is what I ended up with down here. Here, I'll just put them side by side so you can see this was my original RGB. Now this is the RGB that has the H alpha enhanced into the red channel. So, you know, it's pretty good, and you can do, change the values to get the desired effect that you want. So that's one way to do it. Now, the other way is I'm going to put my RGB away. I'm going to bring up the red channel that I extracted from the RGB. Don't really have to bring it up. I'm going to show you anyway. Again, you use the pixel math to get the starless H alpha image here. But instead of doing the pixel math to integrate it back into the RGB, I'm going to go to Script, Utilities, and Blend. Now this is very much like Photoshop. You're really, it's kind of like layering in Photoshop, and it's percentages in using the screen blending mode. So here we're going to put on the screen, and your opacity, you can play with that. Every time you play with it, it'll throw out another image for you to look at. But you need to put in the images that are being worked on here. So I'm going to go and grab my starless image, and I'm going to go and grab my red channel. And this is what I'm getting. And every time I change this, this is what I'm getting. Every time I change this, I want more. It'll give me another image. there. Or I can put it down here. And you go back and forth, and it's basically blending it into, blending them together. Close that, get rid of these. Now, you can do that with, again, the oxygen into the blue and the green if you like. Even sulfur too, you can blend into the red as well. You got to do that carefully or you're going to end up with way too much red there. So those are two different ways, but just say that once you got an image that you're happy with, you save that as the, say, red enhanced. And you would have, I already closed them all, but you would save that as a red enhanced image. And then you have your blue enhanced image, and then you have your green enhanced image. Now you would have to go and back to your channel combination and put the RGB together again that way. The first way I showed you where you use the pixel math to integrate it into the channel, you don't have to recombine them. So those are two different ways to do it. And I'm sure that there are lots of new ways coming. People are coming up with all kinds of new scripts, ways to maybe enhance the luminance. That would be a really interesting thing to do as well. Sometimes you can get a lot of interesting information from the narrowband put into the luminance, and that can help boost the red channel as well. So I hope that helps a little bit. And I'm just really learning this software and coming up with all kinds of different ways to do things, and it's a lot of fun. There you go.
I got confused. I pushed my microphone button back on YouTube, and that doesn't do me any good. Hey, I've got a question. When you started with an RGB frame in the first place, that was a traditional RGB frame that you had made up. It didn't use enhanced with the narrowband filters.
That I just did the usual typical thing that I would do when I'd start an image. It's just a straight RGB. Nothing enhanced yet. No, and no. I can't remember. I think I did a histogram transformation, so it was no longer nonlinear at that point.
Okay. Are there other questions over from YouTube, Eric? Or okay, now we had a third part that you were going to present, right?
Yep.
Okay, go
Molly
for it, Mom.
And we're back. So in 2013, Peter and I had moved to southern BC in Canada, and we built an observatory on our property. In fact, 2 observatories now. This area is rather desert-like, so it's dry and often clear, mostly, not so much in the winter. Also, the view is amazing, and this is where Canada meets the US in the Okanagan Valley, and it's also wine country. And I'm gonna just get my laser pointer. And this hill right here, beyond this hill is the international border. So our view takes in northern Washington as well as southern BC. So we have a pretty good view of 2 different countries here. So Anarchist Mountain Observatory. This is where I'm going to talk about the gear and what we're doing with upgrading and everything and so on. So this is an Astrohaven dome. It's one of those clamshell shutters that opens up all the way and it shows the whole sky. Or if you got strong winds coming from certain directions, you can lift up some of the shutters and protect yourself from the winds, which is pretty nice instead of being so completely wide open. So one morning, Peter took some. Let me run this. Peter took some still shots of Sirius and Orion that were setting, and I put them together and made a time lapse. I thought it was pretty. Often we're above the cloud. Let me run that again. We're often above the cloud, but sometimes we're in it. Like in the wintertime, we're often fogged out. But it's worth it for the rest of the year because it is pretty clear weather there. So inside the dome, is the astrograph, the Ceravolo 300, and it's sitting on a Paramount ME2. And it is on a pier. Well, first of all, the camera we're using right now, this is I think it's a SBIG Lumina 3200, and it's not being used for deep sky imaging at the moment. It's being used for science, and because Peter and I are part of a team of citizen scientists and professional astronomers that do star occultations for research on the outer solar system. Basically, just to let you know what that is, when an asteroid or a trans-Neptunian object passes in front of a star, our team of about 60 stations or so all along the western side of Canada and the US, we record the event. And it is, the Paramount is actually on a pier that is temporarily attached to this concrete pier that goes down 12 feet into the bedrock. The reason it's temporary is because of the new 900 millimeter telescope that Peter's been working on for about 4 years is destined to go on this concrete pier. And this is the beast here that he's been working on. It's pretty exciting. It's a 900 millimeter or 36 inch. It's kind of like the scaled up version of the 300, and I think it's about an F4.5 system. I'm not sure. It weighs about 4,000 pounds, and it's going to take a massive crane to get that into the dome. But we have great plans for this beast, and I can't wait to get using it. But here it is. The mirror goes here, and it's as tall as it is wide, so it's an extremely fast system. So you can tell that Peter is like pretty happy about this thing. So other equipment, the other gear that we're recently acquiring that will first go on the 300 millimeter and later on the 900. Here's an SBIG STX 16803 camera, and it's equipped with an off-axis guider and the filter wheel. And the filter wheel in there has the Astrobin filters that we had before. And also here's a Prima Luce Eagle 3 Pro computer that's going to power all the accessories like the camera, the filter wheel, a focuser, telescope, and all the accessories, a whole bunch of things. And it will get bolted right onto the telescope. And it's nice because it eliminates power bricks and long wires that can get all tangled up. And it's also wireless. So I'll be able to power up everything and get the script running and everything from any device inside the house. Also, I have replaced my desktop computer because I've had the old one I've had for 10 years, so I thought it's time. And also, it was a Windows 7 computer, so I had to change it to Windows 10, unfortunately. But it's more powerful, so that's good. And here on my computer, I've got PixInsight up and running. So really great improvements here, but one of the best improvements I think I've made to Astro imaging in my setup is really getting a good chair, because inevitably you're going to spend a lot more time in front of a computer than you will with a telescope. So you got to have a good chair to promote good posture and be comfortable, because you're going to be spending a whole lot of time there. Okay, so here I've been reprocessing everything from I did in the past, and I wanted to mention my philosophy has actually changed a little. Like, I'm finding myself wanting to push the limits of the data in the image and go for more contrast, etc. I know that we become conditioned to the look of the day and compare our images to others, especially those that are being recognized. We want to make our images pop, but the trick is to go to the limit, even past it, but know when to pull back. And it's best when you finish an image to walk away for a while, come back later and look at it in a different light, maybe even 10 years later. So this NGC 300 image I acquired in Chile with a 20-inch Ritchie Chrétien. This is a second trip to Chile. And the first processing was very gentle and soft. I did this a few years ago. And then when I reprocessed it, it was much punchier. So I really pushed it, and I used the narrowband technique that I showed you and integrated all these H2 regions. This is a really neat galaxy because it's very active with a lot of starbursts, and it's a very, very pretty galaxy. It's kind of like the northern M33, but it's much smaller and further away than that one. Another one is of course, the Helix. Not a lot of difference there, but I found that the background and the star colors were much, much better. And I was able to pull out a lot more detail with the H alpha all around, and the oxygen in the center. So I was pretty happy with that result. And the Corona Australis complex, first time around seemed pretty good, but this time, wow, was I ever able to pull out a lot of the dust out of the background. Now I'm starting to understand how other astro imagers were able to do that. I was always, amazed by some of the images I've been seeing. And that's one thing about recent images that I really am impressed with is all of this dust and stuff that they're able to take out, and really gives you an interesting idea of the extent of all the nebulosity and the dust that's out there that we never noticed before. And NGC 253, the Sculptor Galaxy. Well, this one's interesting because I took this one further than any other image I've ever processed. And I just kept pushing it and redoing it, and finally pushed it a little bit more. And then lo and behold, it was chosen for Image of the Day on Astrobin. So there you go. So I've also been doing other astrophotography, and Peter took this shot of me photographing the total lunar eclipse a year ago. Here I am climbing around on the scaffolding for about 4 hours. I used the Canon 6D, modified 6D on the Ceravolo 300, and I put together a montage on that. And using the same equipment, I think this was Comet Mackalt back in November of 2018, and it was discovered just before it got lost in the sun's glare, and it wasn't around for very long. And so this also is a time lapse, so I'm going to run that. So I got a few frames of it as it rose just before the sun brightened the sky. So, and then it was gone. So also, of course, nightscapes in the Milky Way. Here's this is Mars when Mars was at its brightest, not very high in the sky, but still pretty bright. And it's always nice to have something in the foreground, and of course, the dome was always great for that. But we also have such great scenery. I think this is a airport beacon that kept flashing there, but that's okay. On the other side of the house, one night I noticed, I thought was an aurora. Back in September of 2017, I posted this photo on a Facebook page for the Alberta Aurora Chasers, and they got back to me and said, that's not an aurora. It's a new thing called Steve. It's not new, just newly identified as being different from an aurora. It's lower in the atmosphere and quite localized. A person that took the photo at the same time, the same thing, about 100 miles to the north, so they were way north this way. This Steve, this picket fence, and this ribbon were actually going in the opposite direction in the image. So they were looking at it from over here, and I was looking at it from over here. So that's how localized it is. So I found that to be an amazing thing. And it was amazing to see this, but we hardly ever see aurora where we are. We're a little bit south of the auroral band, but the Steve often ends up showing up in south of the auroral band. So it's probably been around, but this is the first time we actually noticed it. This one was a lot longer, a lot more frames, whereas this one had less frames. And the stars were slightly out of focus, which turned out to be not a bad thing, because then you can see the colors better. So it turned out pretty good. And this is actually, I just did recently, speaking of the Starlink satellites, is a video, a time-lapse video that I took. I was doing a dusk till dawn time-lapse, and lo and behold, Starlink showed up. And that's not the only one. There were many, many, many others I saw there. So crazy. And of course, here's a Venus and the moon pairing. This wasn't recently. This was, I think, maybe a couple of years ago, just looking west, of course, sunset. And the moon, you got to do moon shots. This is actually a special shot for us because it was taken with a 6-inch Coude refractor that Peter recently refurbished. It's a really old thing that we got from Germany, and he's going to be putting in an 8-inch lens in this thing. But this was its first light, and it's quite promising. I want to get into doing more lunar and planetary imaging as well. So I'll be using the Zeiss Coude refractor for solar and lunar and planetary in the future. And this was recent, just this past month, a few weeks ago when the moon was setting, the super moon. And it was a rare sky where the transparency was absolutely perfect, no distortion when it was reaching the mountain peaks. And the sun was just starting to rise in the east. And when it does that, it turns the mountain peaks pink, which is a really amazing thing to see. I've been dabbling in solar a little bit, not so much recently because it's been pretty quiet. I have a 90 millimeter Coronado, but I will be using the Zeiss Coude in the future to do more imaging when the sun gets a little bit more active. And lastly, I'd like to just mention one adventure that Peter and I went on. We're both pilots, and we wanted to see the Great American Eclipse, but we didn't want to drive down and get stuck in all the traffic. So we decided to plan and intercept the totality in Oregon, which is not that far from our home. It was only about an hour flight. And so we planned it all, and it all worked out perfectly, and we intercepted the path of totality. That was my first total solar eclipse, and I'll never forget that. It was just out of this. And it did feel like it was out of this world. It felt like, you know, we were in a spacecraft looking out at a different planet. And here's Peter. He did the flying, and here he is having a look at the sun with a welder's glass. And I just used my Canon 6D with a 200 millimeter lens. Right now I'm just taking a picture of the crescent sun with the welder's glass, and then I took that away and I got some shots here of this totality, what you call Bailey's beads, the diamond ring. And this is all through the windscreen of an airplane. So here it is, a shot through the window of the cockpit, and it did look like this. It was like a hole in the sky with the darkness and the shadow on the ground. And when it was over, we turned the plane around. We were home and toasting with champagne 2 hours later. It was just the most amazing experience. So that's it, and thanks for listening.
Thank you, Deborah. That was it's nice life, huh?
It's work too.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I know, but it's work that a lot of us envy, but we all have our own things to do too. So, hey, Eric, how are we doing on questions over there? Any left over?
I think there's lots of envy over here, especially of that large telescope. Other than that, there's some chit chat.
Oh, how big was that dome? I think somebody asked that earlier.
It's a 12-foot. It's a 12-foot Astro Haven.
And somebody asked if the technique that you showed with the Pix Insight thing, I think that's where that question came up, was is that good on galaxies or just nebulosity thing?
No, I actually did use that technique on NGC 300 to bring out the all the H2 regions all around the galaxy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, so it is useful. Okay.
Deborah, are you familiar with the StarNet process in Pix Insight?
That is one that I'm going to have a really good look at. I've never used it, but I've come across it by other people talking about it on forums, and it sounds pretty interesting. I want to try that.
It'll generate a starless image for you. No pixel map required. Just drag it over on the image. Does a really incredible job for those of us that are still doing tone mapping.
Yeah, I think it's fascinating. In fact, I really am attracted to nebula and objects that don't have any stars at all, because it really gives you a good feel of what's going on in the object. So pretty cool.
Debra, I have a question about the new 900 millimeter you guys are building. What is the control system on the mount on that one?
It's completely designed by Peter. It's not something anybody's seen yet. So it's
You're
the mounts,
designing the
the
electronics
drive,
too?
and everything. Yeah, everything. He's designed this from the ground up with an engineer. He's been working on this for about 4 years.
Oh, okay.
But I don't know the specifics of the gears and the drive.
I was just wondering, like, if he's using, I understand he's building the mount and the telescope and the optics. I was just wondering if he was using like a third-party controller, like an astrophysics or what do you call it? Like a software-based controller or something.
I don't think so, but I think he's just in the midst of looking into that right now. What's out there? It's going to be a pretty heavy-duty thing. It's a pretty strong instrument. It's going to take some heavy-duty gears.
And I also have another question.
Uh-huh.
Do you need an instrument rating to fly through an eclipse?
No, not unless if it was cloud, yes. But if you could see the ground,
dark, you know?
no, it wasn't like real nighttime. We could still see the ground. As long as you can see the ground, you're fine.
Thank you.
That's funny.
What software do you use to capture your images?
At the time we used Maxim DL, but I'm getting set up to use DC3 Dreams now because we have plans to do a lot of survey work, and so DC3 Dreams is going to be better for setting up an entire survey.
Mm-hmm.
So I got that software. I haven't used it yet.
What was that? Okay. I did have a question. When you were showing the comparison between 10-year ago processing and current processing, that was the same data that you were using, correct? You took old data.
Like I said before, that's right. I'm in the midst of reprocessing everything I did in the past with all with the Apogee and the Astrograph and the Maxim DL and everything. Still have all that old data, but I'm now doing it all in PixInsight.
Now, I'm going to have a heart-to-heart talk with you here in public on YouTube. So what would you say to the Debra Ceravolo of, crusading, hey, it's too much color, it's too bright? Where are you on that same, and where are you different?
Are you and me?
Yeah, you. Yeah, like you. Would you have changed your arguments from 10 years ago to now?
Yes and no. I still don't like false color. Sorry, I know a lot of people do it and it's a lot of fun, but there's something about false color. I think that there's a new process, or not new, but HOO, where you put in the narrowband in the channels of the RGB. You can do a lot with narrowband without being false color. But then I'm really starting to push my images with more contrast, and I'm being encouraged by certain people like Adam Blood to push the contrast.
So you're talking about
make it pop.
Your colors still match the scientific emission spectrum of the gases that are there, so that they are the real colors, whatever that would mean. But they're more it wasn't the intensity that was bothering you so much back then. It was that they were artificial colors. They weren't the real colors.
Well, yeah, sometimes people don't have enough data, and so they push it too much, and it becomes garish. That I didn't, I had a problem with. But yeah, as far as spectrally mapping, I don't do that anymore. I have no way of doing that in PixInsight. Maybe somebody can come up with a script to do that. That would be interesting. But I think that the photometric color calibration PixInsight does a pretty good job for color.
Okay. Where are we on the questions over there, Eric? Have you been reviewing the YouTubes?
Yeah, I don't really see anything. I think you caught a couple.
Okay. Molly, you did a great job pushing your buttons over there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks, Molly.
Yeah, no problem.
And everybody out there, I mean, I hope you realize that Tolga was busy, Molly was busy. I wasn't all that busy. Eric, we all have a job to do here, and we really would love to have you part of this. We would love to have your presentations. Come on into the room, make a presentation like this. I don't know how many times I can tell you this. We need your input to get our presenters. So please join us. Next week, again, Frank's going to be joining us, telling us about MetaGuide, not just what it does to guide, but a whole lot of other things. And the week after that, JP Mezzabano is here. And is that it, Tolga? Is that all we've got on our schedule, I think, for right now?
I have to check the calendar is on the website.
Yeah. Okay.
So I try to keep that up to date.
Okay, so if you go to the astroimagingchannel.com, you'll find us, and you can find some of our past shows and all that.
Yeah, the link is on the bottom of the video.
And Terry has been working on making sure that our website is getting updated. As you know, about 3 months ago, I think, some evil dastardly virus got us. Not the Kofifi virus that we're all suffering from, but some other evil virus got us and ruined our website. So we haven't quite got it rebuilt yet, but Terry's working on that, and Eric is keeping us financed. So everybody's doing a job here. Debra did a great job tonight. A whole lot of people liked it. Had 50 some people watching it the whole night, and we'll have another 1,000 watch it during the next week. So thank you very much for being here, Debra. And I think
No problem. It's my pleasure.
I think we're ready to sign off. So Tolga, give us the high sign.
Deborah, you can hang out with us for a while after we go off the air.
Oh, come on. You're going to make everybody else jealous.
Yes, you can all be jealous.
Yeah. Anyway, now we have to sit here and wait for Tolga to tell us that we're
All
finished.
right. All right. Good night, everybody. See you next week. Oh, NEAF and NEAC has been postponed to September. NEAC is on 14th and 15th, and they're swapped now. The NEAC's going to be first. So Saturday, Sunday is going to be NEAF. Monday and Tuesday is going to be NEAC. Just let everybody know. So
Yeah.
that's
Hey, Tolga, while we're here and everybody's still here.
somebody just said they asked a question.
Okay.
We can ask after we go off air, and I'll just post it in the comments.
We're still live, right?
Yes.
Okay. Let's go to the question that was just asked.
Can we have a link to the citizen science project she mentioned about the asteroid star occultation?
Sure, I can send that to you. It's
And I'll
actually
post that on the bottom of the video.
Okay, I'll send that to you.
Okay. Good night, everybody. See you next week.
No, not yet, Tolga.
Okay. Okay.
I changed my mind. Are we out?
Nope.
Okay. Do you know anything about the specifics of watching the virtual NEAF in a couple of weeks?
No.
If you got it, does anybody know anything? Is it posted anyplace? As in, like, do we just are they going to post a website, or do we have to pay to watch it, or what? Does anybody know? Molly, attitude, girl, attitude. Okay, take us out, Tolga.
All right.